Welcome to History Vault, where the past feels close enough to touch. Europe's first great civilization didn't rise beneath the marble shadows of Athens or among the legions of Rome. Its cradle stood out in the Mediterranean Sea on the long, rugged island of Crete, a place where mountain ridges slice into the sky and the water glows a deep, impossible blue. Crete was a meeting point of worlds. Ships from Egypt, traders from the Levant, and early Europeans all crossed paths there. In the Bronze Age, this island fostered a people who built dazzling palaces and lived with a kind of grace rare for ancient times. Their art burst with color, their religion centered on powerful female figures. Their architecture was airy, open, confident, and yet their story nearly vanished. For centuries, all that survived of them was a single haunting myth, the tale of a monstrous bull-man lurking in a twisting maze. Tonight we follow the rediscovery of this forgotten civilization. We'll walk beside the archaeologists who unearthed their palaces from the dirt, revealing brilliant frescoes, mysterious symbols carved in clay, and a language that refuses, even today, to give up its secrets. We'll also explore the possibility that a thunderous volcanic eruption, one of the largest in human history, may have swept this culture into silence. But before we dig into deep time, consider supporting the channel by liking the video and subscribing. It's a small gesture, but a meaningful one. And tell me where you're watching from. Geography and time zones give these nightly journeys an unexpected charm. Now settle in. Let modern noise fall away. Let your imagination sink into the Bronze Age, into the world of the Minoans, the enigmatic islanders whose memory dissolved into myth. Long before historians wrote their timelines, people preserved their past through stories. For Crete, that memory survived as a dark, dramatic legend whispered for generations, a myth laced with divine anger, human pride, and a beast born from a curse. The story begins with King Minos, a ruler said to command a mighty island realm from his palace at Knossos. To prove he truly held divine favor, he prayed to Poseidon, god of the sea, asking for a sign. Poseidon sent a miracle, a brilliant white bull rising from the surf, a creature meant to be sacrificed in gratitude. But Minos admired the bull's beauty too much to give it up. He kept it and offered an ordinary animal instead. Such arrogance toward a god demanded retribution. Poseidon's revenge didn't strike Minos directly. It twisted the fate of his household. Minos's wife, Queen Pasiphae, was overwhelmed by an irresistible obsession for the sacred bull. The goddess-driven madness led her to seek the help of Daedalus, the most gifted inventor of his age. At her command, he crafted a hollow wooden cow in which she could hide. From this terrible deception came a creature unlike anything the world had seen. The Minotaur, Asterion, bearing the muscular body of a human and the head of a raging bull. King Minos, horrified by what his defiance had spawned, ordered Daedalus to design a prison that could hold the beast forever. Daedalus answered with the Labyrinth, an architectural snarl of corridors, turning halls, dead ends, and loops so intricate that those who stepped inside were doomed to wander until hunger, or the monster, claimed them. The legend then shifts to Athens. After a conflict between the two kingdoms, Athens fell to Minos, and the price of their defeat was grim. Every year, the Athenians were forced to send 14 young people, 7 boys and 7 girls, to Crete. They were thrust into the labyrinth as offerings to the monster at its heart. And then came Theseus, Prince of Athens, who refused to let the cycle continue. He volunteered to be part of the next tribute, determined to find the creature and end the horror. When he arrived in Crete, Minos' daughter Ariadne saw him and was swept by a mix of wonder and fear for his life. She secretly approached him and offered 2 gifts, a sword for the battle ahead and a ball of thread to guide him back out of the maze. Theseus tied the thread to the entrance and descended into the choking darkness. The Minotaur's roars ricocheted through the stone passages. Deep inside the twisting maze, hero and monster collided. After a brutal struggle, Theseus struck the fatal blow. The journey out wasn't guided by sight, but by touch, finger trailing the thin thread that led him toward daylight, toward freedom, toward the end of Crete's dominance over his city. And that is how the myth concludes. Not with the fall of a civilization, but with the triumph of a hero and the death of a creature born from a king's pride. For 3,000 years, the world of Crete existed only in whispers, a tale woven from heroes, gods, curses, and the restless imagination of storytellers. It lingered in the shadows between myth and memory, a legend so vast and so magnificent that it seemed impossible for any real history to be buried beneath it. And yet, the truth was there, patient, silent, sleeping under layers of earth and time. It did not wait for a warrior or a conqueror or a king. It waited for a man with a notebook, a theory, and a stubborn belief that the past still had something to say. As the 19th century staggered toward its end, the world was changing. Empires were rising, science was accelerating, and a new hunger, the hunger for the ancient, was sweeping across Europe. This was the dawn of the age of archaeology, when the ground beneath humanity's feet became a vault of forgotten worlds, and the man destined to unlock the mysteries of Crete was Sir Arthur Evans, a brilliant, impossibly confident English scholar whose wealth and curiosity made him almost unstoppable. Evans, keeper of the prestigious Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, was not seeking monsters or labyrinths. His obsession was quieter, stranger, and more intellectual, a lost system of writing. Years earlier, in the bustling markets of Athens, he had discovered small milky white seal stones, tiny objects, carved with delicate, mysterious symbols that seemed older than any writing the Greeks had ever used. Local Cretan women wore them as charms, calling them milkstones for their pale, smooth surface. But Evans saw something different. Not jewelry, not folklore, but the fingerprints of Europe's first literate civilization. Driven by this idea, he followed the trail across the sea to Crete in the 1890s. The island was rugged, wild, newly emerging from centuries of Ottoman rule. Evans traversed it not as a traveler, but as a detective. He went from village to village, buying seal stones, gathering stories, collecting whispers. Every clue pointed him toward a single destination, a broad, olive-covered hill near Heraklion, a place the locals called Kephala. For decades, scholars suspected that this modest hill concealed the legendary Palace of Knossos. Even Heinrich Schliemann, the dramatic discoverer of Troy, believed it. But politics, bureaucracy, and local resistance had blocked every attempt to excavate it. Evans was not deterred. Where others saw obstacles, he saw a challenge. Where others ran out of funding, he simply wrote another check. With the patience of a chess master, he negotiated piece by piece until he owned the entire hill, not just the land, but whatever forgotten world lay sleeping inside it. Then came March 1900, the moment that would become archaeology's turning point. Evans returned to Kephala with over 100 local workmen. The olive trees were cut back, the tools prepared, the air pulsing with the electric tension of possibility. For millennia, the labyrinth had existed only in imagination. Now Evans stood before a quiet hill of dirt and rock, ready to ask the earth a question that had waited 3,000 years for its answer. The first days were back-breaking, sun-soaked, dusty. Walls began to appear, huge blocks of stone that hinted at something monumental. But the structure remained a mystery. Fortress, palace, or something else entirely. Then it happened. A workman's pick struck something fragile. The digging froze. Slowly, carefully, they brushed away the soil. From the dust emerged a splash of color, bright, vivid, alive despite the centuries. More brushing, more clearing, and then the image came into view. A young man with flowing black hair, a noble profile, carrying a long ceremonial cup, the cupbearer fresco. This was no crude depiction from a primitive tribe. This was art, sophisticated, elegant, confident. It was the work of a culture that understood design, color, symbolism, and beauty. Excitement surged through the team. They followed the walls deeper, clearing debris inch by inch, until the earth revealed a sunken, intact chamber. There were gypsum benches lining the walls. And then, against the northern wall, they saw it. A high-backed throne carved from a single block of gypsum. Its curves were delicate, almost regal. Its presence, unmistakable. The small chamber felt alive with ceremony and authority, and as they cleaned further, the walls blossomed with color. Palm trees, stylized landscapes, and two mythical griffins lying in fields of lilies, guardians of an empty seat of power. To Evans, steeped in tales of heroes and kings, there was only one possible conclusion. This was the throne room of King Minos. At that same time, another symbol kept appearing, carved into blocks all across the palace: the double-headed axe, the Labyrinth. In a single audacious leap, Evans connected Labyrinth to the ancient word labyrinth and declared, the labyrinth was not merely a maze, it was the palace of the double axe. Suddenly, the mythology of Minos and the Minotaur seemed less like fantasy and more like memory distorted by time. Evans had come looking for an alphabet, and instead found a kingdom. The first weeks unearthed wonders no one expected: throne rooms, vibrant frescoes, sacred symbols. Myth was transforming into history with every shovel of dirt, and yet this was only the beginning. As the seasons passed and the excavation deepened, Evans and his team realized something staggering. They were not uncovering a building, not a palace, not even a royal complex. They were unearthing a city-sized architectural organism, a labyrinth not of myth but of stone, more intricate, more advanced, and more extraordinary than anything the ancient world had dared to imagine. For nearly 3,000 years, the labyrinth of Greek myth had existed only in legend, a shadowy symbol of mystery and ancient power. Then Arthur Evans stood at the base of an ordinary hill of soil and stone, ready to dig into the past and see what remained of that forgotten world. The early days of excavation were hard and dusty. Workers cleared away layers of earth and brush that had built up over centuries. At first, they uncovered only the tops of huge ancient walls, evidence of a large building, but offering no real sense of what it had once been. Still, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Was this just a simple old fortress, or something far more extraordinary? The answer appeared in a sudden burst of color. A worker's pick struck something soft, and after careful brushing, a small piece of painted plaster emerged. As more dirt was removed, an image slowly came into view, a life-sized portrait of a young man with long black hair and a proud expression, carrying a tall, cone-shaped cup. This fragment was the famous cupbearer fresco, and its quality stunned everyone. This was clearly not the work of a primitive society. The painting showed a refined, confident culture with remarkable artistic skill. Motivated by this discovery, the team followed the walls surrounding the fresco and soon revealed an intact, sunken chamber. Inside, they found gypsum benches lining the sides of the room, and against the northern wall stood something breathtaking, a tall, high-backed throne carved from a single block of gypsum. Its elegant curves gave the small room an unmistakable feeling of authority. As they cleaned the surrounding walls, the space became even more astonishing. The plaster was decorated with vivid images of stylized palm trees. On each side of the throne rested a painted griffin, mythical creatures with a lion's body and an eagle's head and wings, lying peacefully among lilies like supernatural guardians, watching over an empty seat of power. For Arthur Evans, who was deeply familiar with ancient myths, the conclusion felt obvious. With dramatic certainty, he announced that they had discovered the throne room of the legendary King Minos. Around this time, another important clue appeared. Throughout the structure, workers kept finding carvings of a double-headed axe on the huge stone blocks. Evans recognized this sacred symbol, known as the Labyrinth. Suddenly, he made a bold intellectual leap. Labyrinth resembled the word labyrinth. Perhaps the labyrinth wasn't originally a maze at all, he proposed. Perhaps the name meant the Palace of the Double Axe. Within just a few weeks, the discoveries were overwhelming. Evans had uncovered a throne room, beautiful frescoes, and a symbol that seemed tied directly to the heart of the ancient myth. He had come to Crete hoping to find a few inscriptions. Instead, he found what he believed was the seat of a legendary king and a new historical explanation for the labyrinth itself. With every layer of earth removed, the myth seemed to step closer to reality. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. As Evans and his team continued digging over the following seasons, they realized they had not simply uncovered a room, or even a royal house. They were bringing to light an architectural complex of extraordinary size and complexity, unlike anything anyone had expected. What began as a few narrow trenches quickly grew into an enormous excavation stretching across 6 acres. As more earth was removed, it became clear that this was not a single structure, but an entire miniature city built as one continuous palace. Everything centered around a huge rectangular courtyard, a wide, open paved space that functioned as the heart of Minoan life. Here, scholars imagine, major religious ceremonies took place. Priestesses marched in procession, and acrobats performed the dangerous bull-leaping rituals in front of large audiences. Spread around this central space was a maze-like arrangement of more than 1,000 rooms, corridors, workshops, and sacred spaces. Though it looked chaotic at first glance, the layout was actually brilliantly planned. The whole complex cascaded down the gentle slope of Kafala Hill, forming a multi-level city. Some parts rose up to 5 stories high, creating a striking landscape of terraces, balconies, and verandas, all connected by a confusing network of staircases. One of these staircases, the so-called Great Staircase, was especially impressive. It descended several levels into the palace's luxurious residential wing, and its interior was lit by the Minoan innovation known as a light well, an open shaft that brought sunlight and fresh air deep into the building. Walking through the excavated remains, one could immediately understand how the myth of the Labyrinth came to be. There was no single main entrance. Hallways bent unexpectedly, stairways rose and fell, and hidden courtyards or columned halls appeared without warning. It was a place easy for outsiders to get lost in, but perfectly suited for those who knew its layout. To Evans, this complex design was the real source of the Labyrinth legend. But this was not a maze built to imprison a monster. It was a thriving hub of Minoan civilization, with different areas serving every function of an advanced society. In the area Evans identified as the royal apartments, he found elegant living spaces, including the room decorated with the iconic dolphin fresco, and even a flushing toilet connected to a surprisingly advanced plumbing system made of terracotta pipes. The industrial wing revealed workshops where craftsmen shaped pottery, carved stone, painted frescoes, and created jewelry. In the long storage halls, known as magazines, Evans uncovered the economic backbone of the palace, rows of huge clay storage jars, or pithoi, capable of holding more than 200,000 gallons of olive oil and wine. Such capacity showed the presence of a powerful administrative system run by scribes, officials, and priests who managed the wealth of a far-reaching trade network. The Palace of Knossos wasn't built to confine anything. It was the living, breathing center of the Minoan world. Under one vast roof lived the royal family, their attendants, religious leaders, skilled artisans, and the administrators who kept the entire system running. Evans hadn't just discovered a building. He had uncovered the complex and sophisticated structure of a brilliant civilization long lost to time. As archaeologists uncovered the full scale of the Minoan palaces, they faced a surprising and puzzling question. In an age when great civilizations, from the Hittites to the Egyptians, built massive fortresses to protect themselves, the Minoans had done something very different. Their vast centers of wealth and power had almost no defensive walls. There were no towering ramparts, no watchtowers, no fortified gates designed to stop an invading army. This was not a mistake. It was a deliberate choice, a reflection of Minoan culture that set them apart from every other power in the ancient world. Their open architecture suggests a remarkably peaceful society. The palace at Knossos was not a fortress looming over its people. It was a welcoming heart that blended into the surrounding town. Its great west court likely served as a public gathering space, while the entrances were meant for processions and ceremonies, not to repel attackers. This pattern was repeated at other major Minoan sites, such as Phaistos and Malea, suggesting a long period of internal stability. Unlike other lands plagued by constant warfare, Crete seems to have enjoyed centuries of peace, what historians sometimes call a pax Minoa. But this peacefulness alone does not explain why they didn't fear outside threats. The real answer lay not on land, but at sea. The Minoans were the first great naval power of the Bronze Age. Their safety came from a force no other culture could match, a huge, advanced navy. Evidence of this is found on the nearby island of Thera, where a fresco preserved by volcanic ash depicts a fleet of sleek, elegant ships sailing between islands. These ships were not only for war, they were the backbone of a vast trading network that spread Minoan influence across the Aegean and even to Egypt and the Near East. In effect, the Minoan fleet was their true defense. It patrolled the seas, protected merchants, and could intercept invaders long before they reached Crete. Because of this maritime dominance, the Minoans could afford to build open, beautiful palaces instead of grim fortresses. Their power reached outward, toward the horizon, rather than inward in fear. The contrast with the later Mycenaeans is striking. On the Greek mainland, fear of rivals dominated architecture. Mycenaean centers like Mycenae and Tiryns were fortress-like, built with massive uncut stones so huge that later Greeks believed they were the work of mythical cyclopes. Life in these fortified cities was defensive and tense, a far cry from the openness of Minoan palaces. The open design of Minoan palaces was not a sign of weakness. It was a statement of confidence and supremacy. These were people who controlled the seas and didn't need to hide behind walls. And if the walls of the palaces could speak, they would tell stories through color. The Minoans were masters of fresco painting, a challenging technique in which pigments are applied directly to wet plaster. As the plaster dried, the colors became a permanent part of the wall. This method required incredible speed, skill, and confidence. There was no room for mistakes. That these vibrant paintings have survived for over 3,000 years is a testament to the extraordinary talent of Minoan artists. Walking through the corridors of Knossos today is like stepping into a world filled with the ghosts of this lost artistic tradition. One of the most impressive examples of Minoan art is the procession fresco, which once decorated the main entrance to the palace. It shows a long line of young people moving gracefully against a deep red background. They have the characteristic long curling black hair of the Minoans, wear intricate kilts, and carry ceremonial vessels as part of a religious ritual. At the front is the famous cupbearer, a life-sized figure holding a conical ritual cup, his calm dignity serving as a perfect introduction to the formal world of the palace. In the more private living quarters, Minoan art takes on a warmer, more joyful tone. In what Arthur Evans called the Queen's Megaron, he discovered perhaps the most beloved Minoan artwork, the dolphin fresco. In this vibrant scene, a playful group of blue dolphins leaps and dives through a stylized sea filled with fish and spiky sea urchins. The scene is full of motion, energy, and delight, a celebration of the marine life that surrounded and nourished Crete. There is no rigid formality here, only fluid, natural movement. From the same palace comes another small but iconic fragment, a portrait of a young woman Evans nicknamed La Parisienne because of her seemingly modern sophistication. With elaborately curled hair, a single large outlined eye, bright red lips curled in a coquettish smile, and a distinctive sacred knot tied at the back of her neck. She offers a tantalizing glimpse into the world of the Minoan elite. We do not know who she was, perhaps a goddess, a priestess, or a queen, but her enigmatic expression has become a symbol of the civilization's mystery. Of course, no discussion of Minoan art would be complete without the famous bull-leaping fresco. From an artistic perspective, it is a masterpiece of movement and composition, capturing the impossible moment of three athletes vaulting over a charging bull. The figures are painted using the Minoan convention of reddish-brown skin for men and pale white for women, making the participants clear in this dangerous and sacred ritual. Taken together, the frescoes tell a story about a people who loved and revered nature, participated in complex religious ceremonies, and valued beauty, color, and motion. Unlike the art of Egypt or Assyria, there are no images glorifying a single king or scenes of war and conquest. Minoan art reflects a society that was peaceful, prosperous, and joyful. Because their written language is lost, these frescoes are the closest we can come to hearing the Minoan's own voice. It is a language of color and elegance, but one that leaves many secrets unspoken. While the frescoes reveal the grandeur of Minoan society, it is in smaller, more personal objects that their craftsmanship shines brightest. The same sense of fluid, dynamic life seen on the walls is found on pottery, carved seals, and metalwork. The Minoans did not just create art, they lived within it. They were masters of the potter's wheel, creating vessels of incredible thinness and delicacy. During the early palace period, they produced kamares ware, sophisticated pottery exported across the Mediterranean, from Egypt to the Near East. These pots are notable for their eggshell-thin walls and striking decorations. Covered in a glossy black slip, they were painted with swirling white, red, and orange patterns of spirals, rosettes, and stylized flowers that seem to dance across the curved surfaces. The effect is dynamic, almost hypnotic in its motion. Later, Minoan pottery evolved into what is called the marine style, celebrating the sea in breathtaking naturalistic detail. One famous example is the octopus flask from Palais. Its artist expertly wrapped the 8 tentacles of a dark octopus around the flask's rounded shape, filling the remaining space with seaweed, rocks, and sea urchins. Holding the vessel feels like holding a tiny piece of the Aegean Sea itself. Even on a miniature scale, Minoan artistry is extraordinary. The seal stones, which first drew Arthur Evans to Crete, are tiny masterpieces carved from gemstones such as agate, carnelian, and jasper. Magnified, they reveal intricate scenes: priestesses in ritual, bulls, griffins, leaping dolphins, and detailed depictions of sleek Minoan ships. These seals were both beautiful and practical, used to imprint wet clay on documents or containers as a personal signature. From monumental frescoes on palace walls to the tiniest seal stones held between 2 fingers, the skill and imagination of Minoan artists are unmistakable. Every piece, large or small, offers a window into the vibrant, elegant, and sophisticated world of this remarkable civilization. Minoan art is a constant celebration of the natural world, full of movement, life, and extraordinary craftsmanship that stands out even in the Bronze Age. Every piece reflects a culture with a joyful, refined sense of beauty. A civilization that filled every part of daily life, from grand palace walls to everyday objects with vibrant, living art. Yet understanding the Minoans comes with a profound silence at its heart. Unlike the Egyptians, who left the Book of the Dead, or the Mesopotamians, who recorded epic poems, the Minoans left no written accounts of their beliefs. Their script remains undeciphered, keeping their prayers, myths, and spiritual practices a mystery. To glimpse their faith, we must turn to the artifacts they left behind, which point to a deeply spiritual world, very different from their neighbors. The Minoans did not build monumental state temples like those in Egypt or later Greece. Instead, they found the divine in nature. On Crete's highest peaks, such as sacred Mount Juctus, archaeologists have uncovered peak sanctuaries. Here, ordinary Minoans would make difficult pilgrimages to leave small clay offerings, figurines of themselves in prayer, miniature livestock, or clay replicas of injured body parts. These were gestures asking the gods for healing or protection. They also worshipped in dark caves, which they saw as direct connections to the underworld and the powerful earth deities who controlled fertility, death, and renewal. This reverence for the natural world is reflected in their art, where one striking feature stands out: the dominance of female figures. Across frescoes, seal stones, and sculptures, women are consistently shown in positions of power, acting as intermediaries with the divine. They lead processions, receive offerings, and oversee sacred rituals. Men, by contrast, often appear as attendants, musicians, or ordinary worshippers. The most famous example of this female-centered religion is the snake goddess, discovered by Arthur Evans in a hidden stone-lined pit at Knossos he called the Temple Repositories. Buried among other ritual items, the figurines are made of faience, a type of glazed ceramic. The most complete figure stands with wide, intense eyes and outstretched arms, holding writhing snakes in each hand while others coil around her body. She wears a tight bodice that exposes her breasts, a symbol of fertility, and a long, flounced skirt. On top of her tall headdress sits a small feline, perhaps a leopard calmly watching the world. She is a figure of immense power and mystery. Her exposed breasts symbolize life and nourishment. The snakes, creatures that shed their skin, represent renewal, rebirth, and the magic of the underworld. The feline signifies mastery over animals and the natural world. Altogether, she embodies a great mother goddess, a life-giving force connected to the earth and its cycles. Based on such evidence, Early archaeologists like Evans suggested that Minoan society may have been matriarchal, or ruled by women. Women clearly held high status and respect, particularly in religious and ceremonial life, which was unusual in the later patriarchal Greek world. Modern historians are more cautious. There is no definitive proof that women held political power. Yet the art itself speaks volumes. It reveals a civilization in which the divine was predominantly female, and the snake goddess, with her unblinking stare, remains the enigmatic and iconic face of Minoan religion. The snake goddess is a powerful symbol of a very different worldview, one that celebrated the earth, the divine feminine, and a deep connection to nature, standing in sharp contrast to the male-dominated gods of later civilizations. If the snake represented the mysterious chthonic energy of the earth, the bull embodied raw, untamed natural force. This magnificent and dangerous animal was central to Minoan art and religion. Bulls appear everywhere, intricately carved on tiny seal stones, painted on pottery, and crafted into ceremonial vessels. One of the most important symbols was the horns of consecration, a stylized depiction of bull horns that adorned palace roofs and shrines, marking sacred spaces. The central court of the palaces was likely the stage for the bull's most dramatic role, the famous bull leaping ritual. Here, surrounded by frescoed walls and crowded balconies, the Minoan elite would watch athletes perform death-defying acrobatics. Our clearest glimpse of this practice comes from a single iconic fresco at Knossos. The painting captures a moment of impossible motion. A massive bull charges across the scene, its hooves not touching the ground, a visual shorthand for incredible speed. Three slender, long-haired athletes interact with the bull. At the front, a pale-skinned female figure grasps the horns, preparing for the leap. In the center, a reddish-brown male figure is mid-flip, executing a hands-free somersault over the bull's back. Behind him, another pale female figure stretches her arms to catch him as he lands. For over a century, scholars have debated whether this was a literal depiction of a real event. Modern acrobats argue that vaulting over a fully grown, charging bull would be physically impossible. Some believe the fresco is a schematic diagram, showing the three stages of the leap in a single image. Others suggest athletes may have used younger, specially trained bulls or approached from the side, using the animal's momentum to vault across its back. It's also possible the scene was entirely symbolic. Whatever the reality, bull leaping was clearly a sacred, high-stakes ritual that required extraordinary skill, courage, and years of training. This daring ritual is the historical seed of the later Greek myth of the Minotaur. The legend of 14 Athenians sacrificed to a bull monster in a labyrinth is likely a distorted memory of this real Minoan ceremony. While its precise meaning may remain a mystery, the art itself speaks volumes. It shows a culture that faced the raw forces of nature not with brute strength, but with timing, agility, and courage. The bull was the ultimate test, and the ritual celebrated the Minoans' fearless spirit. We have explored the open palaces, the joyful art, and the enigmatic rituals, but another key question remains. What gave the Minoans the wealth and security to sustain such a unique and peaceful culture? The answer lies not in Crete's fields or mountains, but in the sea that surrounded the island. The Minoans were masters of the ocean. Their power was built on the decks of their ships, and the term Thalassocracy, from the Greek thalassa, sea, and Crete, rule, perfectly describes them, a civilization ruled by the sea. The Minoans were Europe's first great naval power. Archaeological evidence, from frescoes, carved seals, and clay models, shows their ships as sleek, crescent-shaped vessels with a single square sail and a high, curved stern. Powered by both sails and rowers, they were fast, maneuverable, and capable of navigating the sometimes treacherous Aegean Sea. These ships were the foundation of a vast trading empire, transporting Crete's prized goods to distant lands. Minoan pottery, especially Kamari's ware, was a luxury export, highly valued across the Mediterranean from Egypt to the Levant. They also traded fine textiles, bronze tools and weapons, and Crete's abundant olive oil and wine, stored in large, distinctive clay jars. In return, they imported essential metals like tin from Anatolia and copper from Cyprus, the ingredients needed to make bronze. as well as gold, ivory, and precious stones from Egypt and the Near East. Their trading relationship with Egypt was particularly significant. In the tombs of Egyptian nobles, such as the Vizier Rekhmir, wall paintings show delegations of foreigners labeled as the Keft, believed to be the Egyptians' name for the Minoans. These visitors are depicted with the long, curling black hair and distinctive kilts seen in the frescoes at Knossos, carrying gifts that include exquisite examples of Minoan artistry. The Minoans' control of the sea provided them with wealth, influence, and security, allowing them to build open palaces, create breathtaking art, and develop a sophisticated, peaceful civilization that would leave a lasting mark on history. Golden bull-headed drinking cups and long-necked pottery from Crete have been found in Egyptian tombs, providing remarkable confirmation that the Minoans were not an isolated culture. They were major players on the world stage, respected enough to send their finest goods to the court of the most powerful king on earth. Minoan influence extended far beyond trade. They established settlements and colonies on other islands, spreading their culture across the Aegean. The most famous was the city of Akrotiri on the island of Thera, a miniature Minoan city with multi-story houses, beautiful frescoes, and advanced plumbing. Other outposts on islands like Rhodes and Kythera acted as crucial trading hubs, controlling sea routes and creating a network of Minoan influence that stretched across the region. This explains why Minoan cities had no defensive walls. Their wealth and security came from mastery of the sea, their Thalassocracy. Ships, not stone walls, were their real protection. Why build massive fortifications when your fleet could intercept any threat before it reached your shores? Their naval power was the engine of their civilization, the foundation of their peace, and the source of their outward-looking culture. Yet this dependence on the sea would also prove to be their ultimate vulnerability. While the grand palaces and treasures of Crete captured the world's imagination, Arthur Evans valued the smaller discoveries just as much. His journey to Crete had begun not in search of a labyrinth, but in pursuit of a lost language, inspired by mysterious symbols on ancient seal stones. In the burned ruins of Knossos, Evans found what he had hoped for, and more. In small, unassuming chambers, his team uncovered the remains of the palace archives, hundreds of flat, pillow-shaped clay tablets. These were not epic chronicles or grand histories. Instead, they were the everyday records of a complex bureaucracy, preserved by accident when the palace burned and the clay was hardened by fire. The tablets contained inventories of wine and olive oil, lists of livestock, rosters of palace workers, and records of offerings to the gods. Their writing combined elegant linear symbols for syllables, simple pictograms for objects like chariots or wheat, and a clear numerical system. As Evans studied the thousands of fragments, he identified two related scripts. The older flowing script, which he believed represented the Minoans' native language, he called Linear A. The younger, more rigid script, found only in the final layer of destruction at Knossos, he named Linear B. For 50 years, both scripts remained a tantalizing mystery, a silent language from a lost world. The code was finally cracked not by a traditional scholar, but by Michael Ventris, a brilliant English architect and amateur linguist. Fascinated by the puzzle since childhood, Ventris devoted years to deciphering it, applying techniques he had learned as a codebreaker during World War II. He meticulously cataloged the symbols, tracked how often they appeared, and made educated guesses about the underlying grammar. In 1952, Michael Ventris made a breakthrough that would change our understanding of the Bronze Age forever. Assuming that the mysterious symbols on the tablets might represent an early form of Greek, he matched them to phonetic values derived from Cretan place names. Suddenly, the strange signs began to form recognizable archaic Greek words. The discovery was astonishing. Linear B was Greek. This revelation proved that in its final phase, the palace at Knossos had been run by Mycenaeans, Greek-speaking rulers from the mainland. Yet in solving one mystery, Ventris confirmed another. If Linear B was Greek, then the older script, Linear A, was not. Linear A remains the true language of the Minoans, a lost tongue that scholars still cannot read today. Its meaning, like much of the Minoan world, is tantalizingly out of reach. Adding to this sense of mystery is another unique artifact found at the southern Palace of Knossos, the Knossos disc. This fired clay disc, about 6 inches across, is stamped with 45 individual symbols arranged in a spiral on both sides. The symbols were impressed into the wet clay using separate stamps, a form of early printing technology unseen again for thousands of years. But its purpose, meaning, and language remained completely unknown, leaving a haunting silence in the Minoan story. Thanks to Ventris, we can read the final administrative records of the Mycenaean rulers at Knossos. But the original voice of the Minoans, the words they used to name their kings, gods, and themselves, remains locked away in a script we cannot yet decipher. It is a civilization we can see in astonishing detail, yet whose own language remains a secret. In the late 17th century BCE, the Minoan civilization had reached its golden age. Their palaces were centers of art and culture, their fleets controlled the Aegean Sea, and their influence stretched from Egypt to the Greek mainland. At the time, it must have seemed that this peaceful, prosperous world would endure forever. But their greatest threat was not a rival army. It was hidden, quietly building, just 70 miles to the north on the island of Thera, known today as Santorini. Thera was a jewel in the Minoan trading network, home to the bustling port city of Crete, with multi-story houses and beautifully decorated frescoes. Yet beneath its beauty lay a sleeping volcano. The first warning of disaster came in the form of violent earthquakes, likely shaking the city and signaling impending doom. Archaeological evidence shows overturned beds and broken pottery, but no human remains. The inhabitants had fled, taking their most valuable possessions, unaware of the scale of destruction to come. When the volcano finally erupted, it unleashed one of the most powerful explosions in human history, far stronger than the eruption of Krakatoa. With a cataclysmic roar, the mountain blew apart, sending a massive column of ash, pumice, and superheated gas more than 20 miles into the sky, forming a mushroom-shaped cloud that blocked the sun. Across the Aegean, daylight turned into a strange, eerie twilight, the sky shifting from blue to yellow to an oppressive gray. Crete was buried almost instantly under thick layers of ash and pumice, perfectly preserving the city. A Bronze Age Pompeii, frozen in time. But the most devastating blow came next. The emptied magma chamber caused the volcano's center to collapse into the sea, creating the massive crescent-shaped caldera that defines Santorini today. This sudden displacement of water generated enormous tsunamis that raced outward in every direction, devastating nearby coastal communities. On the northern coast of Crete, the Minoans would have witnessed terrifying signs of the coming disaster. The sky darkened ominously, and a deafening roar echoed from the north. Then the sea itself pulled back in an unnatural, horrifyingly low tide, revealing the seabed, a silent warning of the disaster to come. Suddenly, a massive wall of water surged forward, moving at impossible speed. It smashed into the unprotected coastal towns, harbors, and villas. The Minoan fleet, the wooden backbone of their empire, source of their power and wealth, was likely destroyed while still in its harbors. Ships were reduced to splintered wreckage within hours. When the waves finally withdrew, the world had changed forever. The sun was dimmed behind a gray, ash-filled sky, signaling a volcanic winter that would last for months, perhaps even years. Thick, gritty layers of white volcanic ash began to fall like slow, poisonous snow, covering the eastern half of Crete. Crops failed, water sources were contaminated, and livestock perished. The Minoan world had not been defeated by an army but by the raw forces of nature itself. Their mastery of the seas was broken, their food supply poisoned, and their once confident, joyful way of life was shattered. The long, peaceful era of Minoan civilization was over. Survival, not prosperity, became the urgent question. For decades, historians believed this disaster marked the sudden end of Minoan civilization, a swift, total knockout. It was a simple and compelling story. But decades of careful archaeological work have revealed a more complex and perhaps more tragic truth. The destruction was not universal. At eastern coastal sites like Palacastro, excavators found thick layers of ash and pumice, along with buildings smashed and swept inland by massive waves. Tsunamis had devastated ports and settlements, and agriculture would have suffered for years, causing famine. Yet the story was very different elsewhere. At the great Palace of Knossos in central Crete and other major southern and western sites, there was little to no ash and no signs of catastrophic destruction at this time. The heart of the Minoan civilization physically survived. Palaces remained standing, and cities continued in altered form. The fatal blows were not to their buildings, but to the systems that sustained their society. The first and most immediate loss was their northern harbors, and a significant portion of their trading fleet, effectively crippling their mastery of the sea. The complex trade network that supplied vital raw materials like copper and tin and exported precious olive oil and wine was disrupted, causing an immediate economic crisis. The second blow was psychological and spiritual. For a people whose religion and art were deeply tied to the beauty and bounty of nature, the eruption must have been incomprehensibly terrifying. The darkened sun, violent earthquakes, and rising sea would have seemed like a sign that the natural and divine order had turned against them. This crisis of faith likely weakened the authority of priests and rulers who were believed to maintain favor with the gods. In this way, the eruption of Thera created both physical and societal wounds, destabilizing the Minoan world and opening the way for new powers in the Aegean. On the Greek mainland, a younger and more aggressive civilization, the Mycenaeans, was rising in power. As the Minoans' control of the sea weakened, the Mycenaeans were able to expand their influence, sailing freely, trading widely, and even raiding with little opposition. The eruption of Thera did not immediately destroy Minoan civilization, but it inflicted a wound from which they would never fully recover. For the next century and a half, the Minoans survived in a diminished state. Their economy was shattered. Famine and social unrest likely weakened their population, and the legendary confidence that had defined their peaceful, prosperous society was gone. Once a civilization that seemed eternal, they now existed in a long twilight, vulnerable and awaiting the final push from the rising Mycenaean power across the sea. When the Mycenaeans took control of Knossos, they were conquerors, but also students. They were younger, less refined, and far more warlike than the Minoans, yet they admired the sophistication of the civilization they now ruled. Instead of erasing the Minoan world, they absorbed its art, technologies, and symbols, adapting them to fit their own militaristic culture. In this way, the Mycenaeans became a bridge, carrying echoes of the lost Minoan civilization to the later Greeks, and ultimately to us. This influence is especially visible in art and architecture. At Mycenaean sites like Pylos and Tiryns, they adopted Minoan fresco techniques to decorate their halls. But while they borrowed the method, the themes changed. The peaceful, joyful scenes of Minoan life were replaced with images reflecting Mycenaean values. Military parades, brutal hunts, warriors in bronze armor, and boar's tusk helmets. The elegant leaping dolphins of Knossos were replaced by grim depictions of warfare. The Mycenaeans clearly respected Minoan craftsmanship, even as they reshaped it to fit their own culture. In a warrior's tomb at Vapheo on the Greek mainland, archaeologists discovered two exquisite golden cups believed to be Minoan-made. One shows a violent, chaotic bull hunt, a typical Mycenaean theme. The other depicts bulls being skillfully and peacefully guided into nets with the help of a decoy cow, reflecting the Minoan respect for harmony with nature. These cups perfectly illustrate the blending of the two cultures. Religious life also shows a mix of influence. The Mycenaeans worshipped the ancestors of classical Greek gods. Zeus, Hera, and Poseidon are all named in Linear B tablets, but they incorporated powerful symbols from Minoan religion. Sacred horns of consecration and double axes appear in Mycenaean shrines, a sign of continuity. The powerful, female-centered Minoan faith faded, replaced by the patriarchal Greek pantheon, yet echoes of Minoan symbolism endured. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Minoans is their influence on myth. Many stories of classical Greece were set during the Mycenaean era, but preserve distorted memories of Minoan civilization. The Labyrinth myth almost certainly recalls the vast, confusing Palace of Knossos. Daedalus, the master craftsman of Greek legend, reflects Minoan artistry. King Minos, the legendary ruler of a sea empire, is a memory of the naval power that Minoans once wielded across the Aegean. In this way, the Minoan civilization did not vanish completely. Its culture became a dreamlike memory for the Greeks, absorbed and transformed by the Mycenaeans, forming a bridge from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. The later Greeks look back on this period as a golden age of heroes, carrying faint but powerful memories of Crete, its sea kings, and the labyrinth at the heart of their origin stories. Minoan art and culture provided the foundation for the earliest roots of Western civilization. Even as their spirit lived on, the physical world of the Minoans faced its final destruction. For roughly 75 years after the Mycenaean conquest, the Palace of Knossos continued to function under new rulers. Then, around 1375 BC, disaster struck. A catastrophic fire, far more intense and widespread than any previous blaze, swept through the entire 6-acre complex, finally ending the era of the Minoan palaces. The grand staircase of Knossos collapsed. The magnificent frescoes were blackened and shattered, and the towering red columns that had supported the palace roofs for centuries were consumed by flames. The palace, which had stood proudly for over 500 years, was reduced to smoldering ruins, and this time it would never rise again. The cause of this final destruction remains uncertain. Was it a natural disaster? Probably not, as other sites on Crete were untouched at the same time. Most scholars believe the fire was intentional. It could have been a violent uprising by the native Minoans, a desperate rebellion against their Mycenaean overlords, or it may have been the work of rival Mycenaeans. Another king from a mainland citadel like Mycenae could have attacked Knossos to eliminate competition and secure control over the valuable trade routes. Whatever the reason, the outcome was clear. The era of the great palaces on Crete had ended. People continued to live in small settlements scattered among the ruins, but the centralized power, wealth, and extraordinary culture that had flourished for centuries were gone. In a historical irony, the very fire that destroyed the palace also hardened the clay tablets of Linear B, preserving for thousands of years the administrative records of the final rulers. After Knossos fell, Crete slowly receded into a provincial backwater. Visiting the palace today is like stepping into Arthur Evans's vision of the past. Unlike other ancient sites, it is not just a field of crumbling foundations. Evans, confronted with fragile ruins exposed to the elements, made the bold and controversial decision to rebuild parts of the palace. Using the reinforced concrete of his time, he reconstructed the iconic red columns, rebuilt the grand staircase, and recreated the vibrant frescoes. Critics argue that these restorations are sometimes more imaginative than accurate, but they allow millions of visitors to grasp the palace's immense scale and beauty. Yet to truly understand the Minoans, one must also visit the nearby Heraklion Archaeological Museum. Here lie the real treasures, the delicate and priceless artifacts excavated from the palace. You can stand before original frescoes, marvel at intricate gold jewelry, and meet the intense, unblinking gaze of the authentic snake goddess figurines. To know the Minoans, one must see both Evans's bold reconstruction and the fragile, exquisite objects that reveal the soul of their civilization. And so our journey ends as it began, with mystery. Even after more than a century of excavation and study, the Minoans keep their deepest secrets. Their language remains unreadable. Their religion is still largely a puzzle. The full story of their rise and fall eludes us. They are a silent civilization, a beautiful enigma. Perhaps this is their ultimate legacy, a reminder that the past is never fully settled, but a continuous journey of discovery. A labyrinth of myth and memory, the Minoans continue to inspire wonder, even thousands of years later. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the ancient world. I hope the story of this lost civilization has brought to life both the beauty and the mystery of the Minoans. May your night be calm and peaceful.